Hello, welcome to Miss Clark Reads To. I'm on page 40 of the PDF. I'm finishing up the ninth Tuesday, and then I will move into the 10th Tuesday. And then when we finish, we'll make book, brain, and heart connections. We have ended the previous video with Mitch telling Maury, "You, Maury, are the father everyone wishes that they had." And Maury has said, I have some experience in that area, meaning I have some experience in wishing for a father that I didn't have. The last time Maury saw his own father was in a city morgue. Charlie Schwartz was a quiet man who liked to read his newspaper alone under a street lamp on Tremont Avenue in the Bronx. Every night when Maury was little, Charlie would go for a walk after dinner. He was a small Russian man with a ruddy complexion and a full head of grayish hair. Maury and his brother David would look out the window and see him leaning against the lamp post, and Maury wished he could come inside and talk to them, but he rarely did. Nor did he tuck them in, nor kiss them good night. Maury always swore he would do these things for his own children, if he ever had any, and years later, when he had them, he did. Meanwhile, as Maury raised his own children, Charlie was still living in the Bronx. He still took that walk. He still read the paper. One night, he went outside after dinner, a few blocks from home. He was accosted by two robbers. "Give us your money," one said, pulling a gun. Frightened, Charlie threw down his wallet and began to run. He ran through the streets and kept running until he reached the steps of a relative's house, where he collapsed on the porch. Heart attack. He died that night. Maury was called to identify the body. He flew to New York and went to the morgue. He was taken downstairs to the cold room where the corpses were kept. "Is this your father?" the attendant asked. Maury looked at the body behind the glass, the body of the man who had scolded him and molded him and taught him to work, who had been quiet when Maury wanted him to speak, who had told Maury to swallow his memories of his mother when he wanted to share them with the world. He nodded and he walked away. The horror of the room, he would later say, sucked all other functions out of him. He did not cry until days later. Still, his father's death helped prepare Maury for his own. This much he knew. There would be lots of holding and kissing and talking and laughter, and no goodbyes left unsaid. All the things he missed with his father and his mother. When the final moment came, Maury wanted his loved ones around him, knowing what was happening. No one would get a phone call or a telegram or have to look through a glass window in some cold and foreign basement. In the South American rainforest, there is a tribe. Hold on. Just scroll up. There's a tribe called the Dasana, who see the world as a fixed quantity of energy that flows between all creatures. Every birth must therefore engender a death, and every death bring forth another birth. This way, the energy of the world remains complete. When they hunt for food, the Dasana know that the animals they kill will leave a hole in the spiritual well. But that hole will be filled, they believe, by the souls of the Dasana hunters when they die. Were there no men dying, there would be no birds or fish being born. I like this idea, and Maury likes it too. The closer he gets to goodbye, the more he seems to feel we are all creatures in the same forest. What we take, we must replenish. It's only fair, he says. The 10th Tuesday, we talk about marriage. I'm going to scroll it up to the top. We're on page 41. I really like this Tuesday because throughout the memoir, we have yet to meet Janine, who is Mitch's wife. And yay, we're going to meet Janine. I brought a visitor to meet Maury, my wife. He had been asking me since the first day I came, when do I meet Janine? When are you bringing her? I'd always had excuses until a few days earlier when I called his house to see how he was doing. It took a while for Maury to get to the receiver, and when he did, I could hear the fumbling as someone held it to his ear. He could no longer lift a phone by himself. Hi, he gasped. You doing okay, Coach? I heard him exhale. Mitch, your coach isn't having such a great day. His sleeping time was getting worse. He needed oxygen almost nightly now, and his coughing spells had become frightening. One cough could last an hour, and he never knew if he'd be able to stop. He always said he would die when the disease got his lungs. I shuddered when I thought how close death was. I'll see you on Tuesday, I said. You'll have a better day then. Mitch? Yeah? Is your wife there with you? She was sitting next to me. Put her on. I want to hear her voice. Now, I am married to a woman, blessed with far more intuitive kindness than I. Although she had never met Maury, she took the phone. I would have shaken my head and whispered, I'm not here, I'm not here. And in a minute, she was connecting with my old professor as if they'd known each other since college. I sensed this, even though all I heard on my end was, uh-huh, uh-huh. Mitch told me. Oh, thank you. When she hung up, she said, I'm coming next trip. And that was that. Now we sat in his office, surrounding him in his recliner. Maury, by his own admission, was a harmless flirt, and while he often had to stop for coughing or to use the commode, he seemed to find new reserves of energy with Janine in the room. He looked at photos from our wedding, which Janine had brought along. You are from Detroit, Maury said. Yes, Janine said. I taught in Detroit for 1 year in the late 40s. I remember a funny story about that. He stopped to blow his nose. When he fumbled with the tissue, I held it in place and he blew weakly into it. I squeezed it lightly against his nostrils, then pulled it off, like a mother does to a child in a car seat. So I'm just going to stop here for a moment and make a heart connection because I'm feeling a little emotional. Because Mitch, you can really see the way this disease is just attacking his voice, his ability to breathe. And now Mitch helps Maury blow his nose. It's the simplest task. And here's Janine, Mitch's wife, who's so graceful and so lovely. And watch how this beautiful connection falls through. Janine smiled. Right here, Janine smiled. Anyhow, my story. There were a bunch of sociologists at the university, and we used to play poker with other staff members, including this guy who was a surgeon. One night after the game, he said, Maury, I want to come see you work. I said, fine. So he came to one of my classes and watched me teach. After the class was over, he said, all right, now, how would you like to see me work? I have an operation tonight. I wanted to return the favor, so I said, okay. He took me to the hospital. He said, now scrub down, put on a mask, and get into a gown. The next thing I knew, I was right next to him at the operating table. There was this woman, the patient, on the table, naked from the waist down. And he took the knife and went zip, just like that. Well, Maury lifted a finger and spun it around. Woo! I started to go like this. I'm about to faint. All the blood? Yuck! The nurse next to me said, "What's the matter, doctor?" And I said, "I'm no damn doctor. Get me out of here." We laughed, and Maury laughed as hard as he could with his limited breathing. It was the first time in weeks that I could recall him telling a story like this. How strange, I thought, that he nearly fainted once from watching someone else's illness, and now he was so able to endure his own. Connie knocked on the door and said that Maury's lunch was ready. It was not the carrot soup and vegetable cakes and Greek pasta I had brought that morning from Bread and Circus, although I tried to buy the softest foods now. They were still beyond Maury's limited strength to chew and swallow. He was eating mostly liquid supplements, with perhaps a bran muffin tossed in until it was all mushy and easily digested. Charlotte would puree almost everything in a blender now. He was taking food through a straw. I'm just going to scroll up. We're on page 42. I still shopped every week and walked in with bags to show him, but it was more for the look on his face than anything else. When I opened the refrigerator, I would see an overflow of containers. I guess I was hoping that one day we would go back to eating a real lunch together, and I could watch the sloppy way in which he talked while chewing, and the food spilling happily out of his mouth. This was a foolish hope. "So, Janine," Maury said. She smiled. "You are lovely. Give me your hand." And she did. "Mitch says you're a professional singer." "Yes," Janine said. "He says you're great." "Oh, no. He just says that." Maury raised his eyebrows. "Will you sing something for me?" "No." I have heard people ask this of Janine for almost as long as I've known her. When people find out you sing for a living, they always say, "Sing something for us." Shy about her talent and a perfectionist about conditions, Janine never did. She would politely decline, which was what I expected now, which is when she began to sing, "The very thought of you, and I forget to do the little ordinary things that everyone ought to do." It was a 1930s standard written by Ray Noble, and Janine sang it sweetly, looking straight at Maury. I was amazed once again at his ability to draw emotions from people who otherwise kept it locked away. Maury closed his eyes to absorb the notes. As my wife's loving voice filled the room, a crescent smile appeared on his face, and while his body was stiff as a sandbag, you could almost see him dancing inside it. So I'm going to make another connection here while I scroll up. So make a book connection that Maury's favorite thing was dancing, and he can't get up and dance. So he closes his eyes, and Mitch says it's almost like you can see from the crescent, the uplifted smile, that in Maury's mind, he's imagining himself dancing to Janine's singing. "I see your face in every flower, your eyes and stars above. It's just the thought of you, the very thought of you, my love." And when she finished, Maury opened his eyes. Tears rolled down his cheeks. In all the years I've listened to my wife sing, I've never heard her the way he did that moment. Marriage. Almost everyone I knew had a problem with it. Some had problems getting into it. Some had problems getting out. My generation seemed to struggle with the commitment, as if it were an alligator from some murky swamp. I love that simile about marriage. An alligator from a murky swamp coming to eat you up. I had gotten used to attending weddings, congratulating the couple, and feeling only mild surprise when I saw the groom a few years later sitting in a restaurant with a younger woman who he introduced as a friend. I'm separated from so and so, he would say. Why do we have such problems? I asked Maury about this, having waited 7 years before I proposed to Janine. I wondered if people my age were being more careful than those who came before us, or something more selfish. Well, I feel sorry for your generation, Maury said. In this culture, it's so important to find a loving relationship with someone because so much of the culture does not give you that. But the poor kids say either they're too selfish to take part in a real loving relationship or they rush into marriage and then 6 months later they get divorced. They don't know what they want in a partner. They don't know who they are themselves. So how can they know who they're marrying? He sighed. Maury had counseled so many unhappy lovers in his years as a professor. It's sad because a loved one is so important. You realize that especially when you're in a time like I am, when you're not doing so well. Friends are great, but friends are not going to be here on a night when you're coughing and can't sleep, and someone has to sit up all night with you and comfort you and try to be helpful. Charlotte and Maury, who met as students, had been married 44 years. I watched them together now, and she would remind him of his medication, or come in and stroke his neck, or talk about one of their sons. They worked as a team, often reading no more than a silent glance to understand what the other was thinking. Charlotte was a private person, different from Maury, but I knew how much he respected her, because sometimes when we spoke, he would say, Charlotte might be uncomfortable with me revealing that. And he would end the conversation. It was the only time Maury held anything back. I've learned this much about marriage, he said now. You get tested. You find out who you are, who the other person is, and how you accommodate or don't. Is there some kind of rule to know if a marriage is going to work? Maury smiled. Oh, things are not that simple, Mitch. I know. Still, he said, there are a few rules I know to be true about love and marriage. If you don't respect the other person, you're going to have a lot of trouble. If you don't know how to compromise, you're going to have a lot of trouble. If you can't talk openly about what goes on between you, you're going to have a lot of trouble. And if you don't have a common set of values in life, you're going to have a lot of trouble. I'm going to scroll up. Your values must be alike. And the biggest one of those values, Mitch? Yes, your belief in the importance of your marriage. He sniffed, then closed his eyes for a moment. Personally, he sighed, his eyes still closed. I think marriage is a very important thing to do, and you're missing a hell of a lot if you don't try it. He ended the subject by quoting the poem he believed in like a prayer. Love each other or perish. Okay, question. I say to Maury, his bony fingers holding his glasses across his chest, which rises and falls with each labored breath. What's the question? Lie. He lies. What's the question, he says. Sorry, that looks like a little typo there. Remember the book of Job from the Bible? Right. Job is a good man, but God makes him suffer. To test his faith. There's another little typo here. Good man. I remember. Takes away everything he has. His house, his money, his family, his health. Makes him sick. To test his faith. Right. To test his faith. So I'm wondering. What are you wondering? What do you think about that? Maury coughs violently. And his hands quiver as he drops them by his side. I think, he says, smiling, God overdid it.